Hello, my name's Peter Shearman. I'm Head of Innovation for Cisco in the UK and I'm in the Emerging Technologies and Incubation team. Real pleasure to be with you all today and to be talking about a subject that's close to Cisco's heart and interests, and indeed my own team's interest. I'm responsible for all of our collaborative innovation work within the UK. We have a team of innovation specialists that run collaborative innovation with startups, SMEs, universities, and partners, customers within the UK. And we've been doing that for about the last 8 years now, and it allows us to explore new technologies, new areas, issues that and challenges that Cisco can be involved in and bring its capability to, and also explore things that the company wouldn't otherwise look at. For those who aren't familiar with Cisco, we are an IT infrastructure company, but obviously in today that encompasses an awful lot, from your basics and your switching and routing and compute and wireless and everything else, through application security, and increasingly cloud native and AI and so on. So there's an awful lot, obviously, that Cisco is therefore involved in and interested in. And IoT is one of those big areas, and those who are familiar with our work in that space will know our push into fog computing over the last half a decade, and more indeed, and our capabilities that have ranged from Jasper and the connected vehicle infrastructure and so on, and managed services, all the way through to more recent developments like the Sentry acquisition, which gave us cyber vision, which gives us kind of end-to-end IT/OT monitoring and visibility. And we've had forays into the building management world and all sorts. So IoT has been a big part of Cisco's innovation and development over the last decade or more. What I'm going to talk to you about today is some of our the reasons behind our interest and some of our prior work, and then we're going to talk about ManySecured and the areas of the ManySecured project that we want to see collaborations and further work in. But let me start by saying, as a team and as an innovation function in the UK, our interests are very broad and cover a lot of areas. We've recently, for example, completed and launched the Smart Mobility Living Lab, which is a connected autonomous vehicle test bed down in South London, on Queen Elizabeth Olympic Park, and also along the waterfront in North Greenwich, where if you're familiar with the world of connected vehicles and connected roadside, IoT plays a critical role in the ideas and the technologies and the models that are being tested and developed there. We completed CityVerve, which is an IoT smart city demonstrator up in Manchester. £10 million exercise, 20+ project partners, and that was a really interesting exercise in the IoT business cases and use cases, and actually, we quickly got to the point in a number of those explorations where we hit that you either do it cost effectively or securely, but you can't do both, and that really got us looking at the value extraction from IoT and how you increase the value proposition in the business case in order to be able to make these things stack up. And indeed 5G rule first, which brought us into tries to use 5G and developments in 5G technology to allow communities to self-build and self-provision and break the investment cycle that they always see in whenever we move up a generation. And but increasing that relies on IoT. Those business cases often depend on moving from density of people to density of things, and so getting the IoT story right matters for making that business case stack up for those communities. And then we're involved obviously in ManySecured. We also lead the iTrace project, which is looking at how we can bring edge computing and blockchain to bear on this problem, which is another approach to solving. And in previous times, we had the Assure project, which also looked at IoT, and that was something where we built on the back of our small cell heritage with Ubiquitous, which small cells are rogue agents on the network themselves, and so we looked at how we used the authentication and deployment processes and approaches in that world, and said, well, could you apply that to constrained devices? And you've got to take a lot of the intelligence off the edge and put it in the network. But we tested and demonstrated some novel concepts that wound up in the IoTSF about how we do deployment, device configuration, control, lifecycle management, and things like that. So we've had a broad interest in IoT through UK innovation, working with UK partners on these topics for a number of years now, and it's always been there as something that we feel need to resolve. Cisco has a pretty broad IT and IoT security portfolio, as you would expect. A number of these are kind of market-leading products, but also Talos is our threat research group. Sits around prodding, poking, finding ways to break things, to stay one step ahead. They're terrific, and what occurs to me and occurs to us is that we have that for enterprise networking. We still need that capability in IoT, but it's a more fragmented space, and although we have it in some ways, it needs that still needs further work, and I think that's something we'll come back to. But from a Cisco perspective, from an IoT, we've built this kind of end-to-end capability and view to kind of connect and protect modern industrial systems, right the way from the enterprise right through to that kind of OT environment. We're interested in how we connect the sensors on the plant floor and the robotics, and right the way through to how we do the cloud security and application security on the back end. So that's our interest, that's our proposition. That's why solving that end device challenge is meaningful to us. I think we've talked a little bit about this already, but this is the ManySecured project and group, and very pleased that Cisco are able to participate. And Nick and Inquiring Minds are the project lead and a long-time innovation partner for Cisco. But obviously, the group have working with Oxford University and the IoT Security Foundation is an important part of working across the interests and skills that we have, but equally we're here because we also think that there's a wider collaboration that's needed, and I know that Duncan's going to talk about that in due course. So let's talk a bit about ManySecured and some of the key principles at work here. And I think what I say is the things that we're looking at, the things that we want to do. None of this is particularly new. None of this is things that you don't find already in enterprise networking, for example. They're all things that we have. We just, how do we apply them to that kind of IoT domain, and particularly that constrained device environment. So if we take a few of these areas for future collaborations, foundations. How do you implement the internals of a secure gateway? This is what exercised us when we were looking at Assure, and we didn't necessarily start there. We started with how we do the secure communications channels, if you like, but we ended up having to come back to the deployment because this is where all our vulnerability started, and we had to overlap that with the deployment story, with the user journey of how these things end up in the wild, and the complexity of that is it's not complexity, it's rather the simplicity that you need. in order to align with how these things get out into the world. So that was critical for us to then define that kind of underlying foundational security, and that you would then build on top of with other things. Secure communications. How do IoT devices communicate securely on internal network? Again, that kind of key distribution concepts and so on. Again, that was something that exercised us before, and it remains something to solve. And particularly, if that device is that constrained, how do you make that work? How do you? This was a problem where you had. Because you had the multiple ownership problem, the multiple stakeholder problem, we've looked at how you try and solve that through things like MUD and so on, and you just run into that ecosystem problem, that how you get everyone lined up when you don't own the end to end. So we've got those problems to resolve. Update management, that's not a problem in our traditional world, but with IoT devices, how do you know? How do you manage that? How do you do that simply and easily? These are the problem statements that we come up against. Monitoring is an essential part of network management, and we are leaning on that as our as a tool in our security arsenal. Behavioral fingerprinting of devices, of applications, of end users. This is the direction that we're headed in. You don't need dual factor authentication if you've got continuous multi-factor authentication just from monitoring your network. That's a kind of direction of travel for us. But but still being able to do that with IoT, when you've got this segregation, when you've got limited insight and knowledge of and activity even at that device level, how are you aggregating? How are you conceiving of understanding device behavior and so on and so forth? Network isolation, again, which is not atypical. Threat detection. Before or soon after compromise, how are we understanding that? If you don't have the smarts, how is that being understood? And we need to define the kind of flexible models and kind of intelligent detection and then subsequent control of those issues. And again, something that we know how to do, but how can you do that in that kind of IoT framework? And then that kind of smart control, which again, it's a collaborative problem because we can do that when it's an end-to-end, and even beyond the end-to-end, you can figure out the points of interoperability and communication, but we need those kind of simple interoperable standards for network control across that stack, because you don't at the moment have that visibility and control to be able to manage those events, and that from device on through, it's still without of our reach, which I think gets to the point of what we're here to encourage and to invite, really, which is the collaboration. And I think when Nick first pitched this to us, what we were really interested in was the thing that made sense to us was that yes, you do need to be able to collaborate across the ecosystem. There is a lot to be learned and gained through that sharing of activity and threat information analytics, and being able to know that you can improve the security profile of this end to end based on that kind of information sharing and that knowledge exchange across the ecosystem. And so how do we get to there? How do we get to that point? Well, it's an open invitation. I think we have to have that, but we have to have that collaborative effort because of the the nature of the way the ecosystem around IoT has emerged, and some of the unique constraints that we ask it to operate under. And I think if we can do that, we can all win, because ultimately this is about growing the size of the IoT pie. It's about not having to look at that trade-off between cost-effective or secure, not both. I think we've constantly seen those use cases and those market opportunities spring up where we just can't look at it now, and you end up ignoring them. You lose those because you can't address them in a way that makes sense. And so we have to have that as we have to start opening those back out by solving in situations like this. So for me, I'm grateful for your time. Thank you for sticking with me. And so we're here to collaborate, and very excited to see where this can take us. I think I'll now hand over to Duncan. Thank you.
Thank you, Peter. My name is Duncan Purves, and I am the IoT Security Foundation's Project Manager for the ManySecured Collaborative Intelligent IoT Gateway. What is the IoT Security Foundation's role in this project? The answer is in the name of the project, collaborative. In his keynote address, Stephen Patterson talked about "We're all in this together." Our role in this project is to engage with and bring the all or many together and facilitate collaboration in the areas of the sharing of best practice, knowledge, methods, reference designs, and data to address the problems associated with the billions of insecure IoT devices already out in the field and likely to be deployed in the future. It is only through collaboration that we can achieve interoperable security. Peter has talked through this slide, highlighting the areas where we wish to collaborate. And Nick Allott, in his talk earlier, has shared some of the early work of the project around the consumer IoT attack surface. As the project develops, we look to address the questions posed in this slide. For example, how can you monitor IoT activity across IP and non-IP networks? How can you identify a threat before or soon after compromise? And how do we share information? The IoT Security Foundation will be setting up a special interest group in the new year to facilitate the bringing together and collaboration of key IoT stakeholders and end users, as well as the areas for collaboration that we have already outlined. We will look to develop a ManySecured certification program for gateway manufacturers to provide assurance to end users that the products they are buying have been designed, manufactured, and can be maintained following security best practice. This will raise customer confidence and help grow the market to the benefit of all vendors. We will look to engage with end users and customers to provide input to the use cases that we will support, test and validate the outputs to make sure that they meet market requirements and are fit for purpose. Finally, my ask to you is, please contact me if you are an end user, a gateway OEM ODM, a communication service provider, a systems integrator, and are interested in and would like to get involved with this project and join the SIG. You can see my contact email address at the bottom of this slide. Thank you for listening to my presentation. Before we move to questions, I encourage you to join our other project partners' talks. On Thursday, Kubalai will be speaking about the open security challenges and opportunities in industrial IoT and Industry 4.0 systems. On Friday, Nick Allott will be doing a deep dive on responding to the IoT attack surface threats, an overview of current initiatives to secure IoT.